The phone rang at 4:12 in the morning. At my age, 66, I've learned that nothing good comes before sunrise. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my chest tightened, the same way it used to all those years ago when I woke at every creak in the house, hoping it was my son coming home. Hello? My voice sounded thin. A slight hiss of static, then a woman spoke. Calm, professional, but urgent. Miss Harrow? Is this Amelia Harrow? Yes. My name is Dr. Liana Okabe. I'm calling from Northlake Medical Center in Victoria. I'm contacting you about your son. My heart stumbled. My, what? Your son, Nathaniel. He's here, and he's asking for you. I sat down on the edge of the bed so fast the mattress groaned. The room felt tilted. That's not possible. My son died 32 years ago. Quiet pause. Then the doctor said, the man here has identification in the name of Nathaniel Harrow. He has a scar behind his right ear in the shape of a small hook. According to him, you used to call it his fisherman's mark. My breath vanished. No one knew about that. Not the police, not the reporters back then, not even extended family. It had been our private joke when he was 4 and obsessed with boats. Where is he? I managed. In the psychiatric wing. He was brought in 2 days ago during a crisis episode. He's stable now, but confused. He remembers you. I checked the clock. 4:14 a.m. Victoria was a 3-hour ferry and highway trip from my home in Nanaimo. 4, if the morning ferries were slow. I'm coming, I said, already reaching for the lamp. I'm leaving right now. I hung up before she added another word. Beside me, my husband Jonah blinked awake. Who was that? You're shaking. I pulled on yesterday's clothes. Someone says they found Nate. Jonah sat upright. Amelia, I know how it sounds. I shoved my feet into shoes with trembling hands. But she knew about the fisherman's mark. Jonah went still. We'd had imposters before. A few in the early years. People who wanted attention or money. They always slipped up. They always got something wrong, but not this. Do you want me to come? He asked quietly. Not yet. Let me face it first. If it's him, I'll call you. If it's not, my throat closed. I need you here so I have something steady to return to. He didn't like it, but he understood. After 45 years of marriage, he always did. I grabbed my keys, stepped out into the cold, dark morning, and drove toward the first ferry, my chest burning with something I had never allowed myself to feel again. Hope. But I didn't know then that the truth waiting on the other side of that ferry ride would be far more tangled and far more terrifying than any version I had imagined for 32 years. The ferry left the dock at 5:20 a.m., its engines rumbling beneath my feet as the shoreline of Nanaimo faded into the gray dawn. I'd taken this route hundreds of times, but never with my hands shaking so badly I had to clasp them together just to steady them. The sea outside was a flat sheet of pewter. Even the gulls seemed quieter than usual, as if the world understood I wasn't ready for noise. I found an empty booth and sat facing the window. I didn't want breakfast. I didn't want coffee. I wanted answers that I was afraid to receive. For 32 years, I had lived with one truth. My son, Nathaniel Harrow, disappeared at 16 and never came home. The RCMP had called it a presumed death after they found a backpack like his near the old logging road in 1994. Nate said animals and weather made recoveries difficult. They'd talked about likelihood. They'd talked about acceptance, but they hadn't found him. I'd buried an empty urn next to my parents and tried to build a life around that emptiness. Jonah and I had lost each other for a while. Grief rearranges marriages. Some survive, some don't. Ours limped forward because neither of us could bear another loss. The ferry hummed beneath me, and for the first time in decades, I allowed myself to picture Nate's face. Not the 16-year-old missing poster version, but what he might look like now. 32 years older, a grown man, Maybe gray at the temples, like Jonah. Maybe thin. Maybe weathered. Maybe alive. The dockworkers' voices crackled over the loudspeaker, announcing our approach to Swartz Bay. I stood before the ramp even lowered, my breath sharp and shallow. The drive to North Lake Medical Center took less than 20 minutes. The city was waking up. Cyclists, dog walkers, the smell of fresh bread drifting from a bakery on hillside. Normal life. It grated against me. Too bright, too casual. At the hospital, the receptionist directed me to the 3rd floor, psychiatric wing. Secure, quiet, muted colors on the walls. My steps slowed with each turn of the corridor. Dr. Okabe met me at the double doors, small, sharp-eyed, wearing a cardigan covered in tiny embroidered cranes. "Miss Harrow," she said with a soft incline of her head, "thank you for coming so quickly. Where is he?" The words came out before I could stop them. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied me for a long moment, the way people do when they know the ground is about to shift under your feet. "There are things you need to understand before you see him." My stomach dropped. "Is he hurt? Is he conscious?" "He's awake," she said gently. "But everything about his identity has been fractured for a very long time. He's been living under another name, another life." My heartbeat thudded loudly in my ears. "What name?" I whispered. She hesitated. "He calls himself Rowan Beck." The world tilted, and before I could process that impossible name, the doctor added one more sentence, the sentence that changed everything I thought I knew about my son's disappearance. He says, Dr. Okabe continued carefully, that Rowan Beck is the name he was given, not the one he chose. Given. The word lodged under my ribs. I forced my voice steady. Given by whom? She motioned for me to walk with her down the hallway. The floors were polished so smooth, they reflected the overhead lights like ripples on quiet water. "For most of his adult life," she said, "he's believed he was abandoned as a child. His memories before age 12 are distorted, scattered, or missing entirely. When he was admitted 2 days ago after a dissociative break, he began recalling fragments. A house by a cliff, a wooden swing in a backyard. A mother who baked apple bread every Sunday. A younger brother he thought he dreamed up, but who, according to him, had a tiny birthmark shaped like a comma on his left hip." I stopped walking. "My younger son, Daniel, had that birthmark, still does. I remembered the day he was born, how the nurse pointed to it and joked it looked like a punctuation mark. I gripped the railing beside me. No one besides family knew that." Dr. Okabe nodded. "Which is why we contacted you." My knees felt unsteady. For a moment, I was sure the floor had tilted. What else has he remembered? She gave me a look I couldn't read. Sympathy mixed with caution. Pieces, not a full picture. Trauma can bury memory very deeply. What kind of trauma? She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said, "He remembers being taken in by a woman. He doesn't recall where. He doesn't recall when. Only that he woke up in a strange house with a new name and rules he didn't understand." A cold wave rolled through me. "Taken," I repeated, tasting the bitterness of it. "His memories aren't linear," she said. "But what he does recall is consistent with a long-term identity displacement. He's lived as Rowan for more than 3 decades. Jobs, shelters, moving from place to place. He's experienced periods of homelessness, periods of stability, but nothing has felt anchored, not until 2 days ago." We stopped in front of a closed door, room 318. "This is him," she said quietly. "Before you go in, I need you to understand something important. He's terrified." "Of what?" "Of being wrong, of hurting you with the truth. And," she hesitated, "of not being someone you can accept anymore." My throat tightened. "He's my son." She stepped aside and placed her hand on the doorknob. "Then prepare yourself. He doesn't look like the boy you lost. He doesn't sound like him. But when he said your name, Amelia, there was recognition." Her words hit me like a blow. "Are you ready?" she asked. I wasn't. Not at all. but I nodded. The door began to open, and the moment I stepped inside, I realized nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the man waiting on the other side. The room was small, washed in that soft hospital light that makes everything look faded around the edges. For a moment, I couldn't see him clearly. He sat by the window, his back to me, shoulders slightly hunched, hands folded in his lap, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to move. Then he turned, and my world cracked. He was older, of course, nearly 50 now. His hair was dark with streaks of silver. His face was leaner, sharper. There were lines carved from years I never witnessed, shadows beneath his eyes from nights I didn't tuck him into bed. He wore a simple gray shirt and hospital-issued joggers. Nothing remarkable, except his eyes. Those were Nathaniel's eyes, a particular shade of hazel that always caught the sun and turned gold at the edges, a color I hadn't seen in decades. He stood slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might frighten me away. "Mom," he whispered. The word landed like a blow and a blessing at the same time. My breath trembled. "Nate?" His face tightened. He didn't step closer. He only nodded once, almost apologetically. I think so. I didn't before. I didn't remember anything before 12. But I do now. At least, pieces." I took a few uneven steps closer. He watched me with a mix of hope and fear that wrung my heart dry. "I remember the apple bread," he said quietly. "The one you made with the sugared crust. You burned it once because I kept asking questions and you lost track of time." He swallowed. "You said that was proof. I talked too much." A choked laugh escaped me. "You did. Constantly." His lips twitched, but the smile didn't fully form. "I remember Daniel, the way he followed me everywhere. And I remember the day I taught him to ride his bike on the gravel road, even though you told me to wait for Jonah." He rubbed the back of his neck nervously. "I remember some things clearly. Others are like smoke. Like I know they happened, but can't touch them." I reached out, slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. When my hand touched his cheek, the dam inside me broke. Tears blurred my vision. He closed his eyes, leaning into my palm as though trying to memorize the shape of it. "I looked for you every day," I whispered. "Every single day, Nate." His voice cracked. "I didn't know who I was, or where I came from, or if anyone wanted me back." He opened his eyes, and the pain inside them nearly leveled me. I didn't remember I had a mother who loved me. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then he clutched me with both arms, desperately, like someone holding on to the edge of a cliff. We stayed that way for a long time. The kind of long time that resets something inside you. When he finally pulled back, he wiped his face with the heel of his hand. "There's something I need to tell you. Something that came back in the last 2 days. Something important." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" He hesitated, glancing at the door as if afraid someone might overhear. "It's about how I disappeared. Mom," he said quietly. "I think someone took me, and I think I finally remember who." I felt my heartbeat climb into my throat. For decades, I had rehearsed every possible explanation for what happened the day my son vanished. Runaway, accident, stranger, chance. But hearing him say, "someone took me," made my skin go cold. "Nate," I said carefully, "just tell me what you remember." He lowered himself into the chair by the window again, and I sat across from him. For a moment, he just stared at his hands, rubbing his thumb over a small scar near his knuckle. A scar I remembered from when he fell off the old rope swing behind the house. I had stitched it myself, my hands shaking the whole time. "It's still coming back in pieces," he said. "Sometimes it feels like I'm watching it happen to someone else. Sometimes it feels like I'm right back there." I waited. "I remember running out of the house that night," he said finally. You and Jonah were fighting about money. I got scared. I wanted air. I didn't go far, just past the field and down the old service road. I nodded slowly. That part wasn't new. The police had pieced together that much. A neighbor saw him heading toward the trees. After that, the trail went cold. What happened next? He swallowed hard. A car pulled up. A woman got out. A woman? My voice cracked despite my effort to stay steady. He nodded. Short hair, dark jacket. She said I looked upset. She said she knew the area and could drive me home. I didn't want to get in, but she kept talking. She said she worked with kids. She knew my name. I froze. Your name? Yes. His fingers clenched. She said, It's all right, Nathaniel. I'll take you back. My skin prickled. Did you know her? Had you ever seen her around town? No, but I thought maybe she really did work with kids. Maybe she got my name from school or something. He closed his eyes. I got in the car. A wave of helplessness hit me. I tried not to show it, but I felt Jonah's absence like a bruise. We should have been hearing this together. She didn't take me back home, he continued. She drove toward the highway. And when I asked why, she said she had to make one stop. His voice shook. That's all I remembered for years. A car, a woman's voice, then nothing. I leaned forward. But now? He opened his eyes, and the fear inside them shifted into something darker. Recognition. Now I remember waking up in a different house, he said. A small one, in a neighborhood I'd never seen. She gave me new clothes, new rules, a new name. She said I had to forget everything before that night. My stomach twisted. What did she want from you? Nate looked straight at me, jaw tight. That's what I'm trying to piece together. But I know this much. He lowered his voice to a whisper. She wasn't working alone. And Mom, I think at least one of them knew our family. A hollow tightness spread through my chest. What do you mean, someone knew our family? Nate didn't answer right away. He looked past me, toward the small window where morning light filtered through the blinds. His jaw worked as if he were trying to chew through memories that still tasted wrong. When I woke up in that house, he said finally, there was a man there too. Older, quiet. He wasn't the one who took me, but he acted like he'd been expecting me. My breath caught. Do you remember his face? Only pieces, sharp eyes, a heavy brow. He always wore a cap pulled low. Nate rubbed his thumb against his palm. He spoke gently, but his gentleness felt rehearsed. I forced myself to stay calm. What makes you think he knew us? Nate leaned forward, elbows on his knees, because he said something on my second day there, something I dismissed as a dream for years. He took a deep breath. He said, Your mother shouldn't worry so much. She's strong. She'll be fine. The hairs on my arms stood up. How would he know anything about me? I whispered. Nate shook his head. I don't know, but he said it with certainty, like he'd seen you, like he knew how you reacted to things. My mind raced through the past, neighbors, coworkers, strangers who lingered too long in conversation. But nothing connected, nothing fit. He and the woman argued a lot, Nate continued, about me, about whether I was ready, about how long they could keep me. My pulse hammered. Keep you for what? He stared at me with a look I had never seen in him before, fear mixed with shame. That's the part I still can't see clearly. Every time I get close to remembering, it slips away. Like someone slammed a door in my mind and locked it. He pressed his fingers to his temples. But I remember learning the new name, Rowan. I remember being told that Nathaniel was gone, that he had moved on. I clenched my fists. Moved on, I repeated bitterly. They stole you and tried to erase you. He didn't deny it. Over time, he said, I stopped trying to remember. It hurt too much. And they knew how to punish me when I asked questions. A chill rippled through me. Punish how? He looked at the floor. By moving me again. By threatening things I didn't fully understand. I was a kid. I didn't know what they were capable of. I sat back, my heart beat loud in my ears. Do you know what happened to them? I asked. The woman? The man? Nate shook his head. No. But something else came back this morning. Something small but important. What is it? He lifted his eyes to mine, and something haunted flickered behind them. The woman, he said quietly. She had a bracelet, with a name on it. A name I think I've heard before. My throat tightened. Whose name? He said it slowly, as if tasting it for the first time in decades. Nariel. And Mom, I'm almost certain that name belonged to someone from our town. The name hit me like a cold wave. Marielle, I repeated, trying to steady my voice. Are you sure? As sure as I can be, Nate said. It was carved into a small silver bracelet. I used to stare at it when she wasn't looking, trying to memorize the letters. My mind spun. Nariel wasn't a common name. Not in our old town. Not anywhere nearby. I could think of only one person who fit. So the bracelet, it wasn't yours? I asked. He shook his head. No, she wore it every day. She kept touching it, like it meant something, or like it reminded her of someone. My stomach twisted. We had a Marielle in town, I said slowly. Marielle Sutton. She worked at the community center. She ran the youth programs. Nate's eyes flickered. Youth programs, he breathed out. That sounds familiar. Others said she found a job in Alberta. I'd never bothered checking. I was too busy surviving. What else do you remember about her? I asked. Nate leaned back, his gaze drifting to the window again. The bracelet glinted when she drove. She'd tap the steering wheel with her fingers. 3 taps, pause, then 3 more. A memory rose in me with uncomfortable clarity. Marielle at the community center, tapping her clipboard with that same rhythm whenever she was thinking. I thought it was a harmless quirk. Now it felt sinister. She painted her nails dark red, Nate added, but the polish chipped fast, and she smelled like eucalyptus. He grimaced slightly. Too much of it. My pulse thudded. Nate, did she ever say why she took you? No. He rubbed his forehead. But I remember one night, maybe days after she'd taken me, she said she was fixing something. That she was doing what needed to be done. A chill ran through me. What did that mean? I don't know. His voice dropped. But the man she lived with disagreed. They argued about whether I was the right one. She said something like, he'll adapt. He's stronger than the others. My skin prickled. The others? Nate's jaw tightened. That's what scares me. I wasn't the only child in that house over the years. I remember footsteps, whispering, kids crying at night. But I never saw them clearly. I felt sick. The door creaked open slightly, but no one came in. A cart rolled past, wheels squeaking. Nate didn't look up. There's something else, he said quietly. Yesterday, when I was waking up after the episode, I remembered a street, a sign, a place she drove to. I didn't understand it before. He looked straight at me, fear widening his eyes. But I do now. My breath caught. What place? His voice dropped to a whisper. Westminster Lane. My stomach plunged. Nate, that street is only 5 minutes from our old house. Mom, he said, trembling. I think they were closer to us than we ever realized. For a long moment, I just stared at him, unable to speak. Westminster Lane wasn't some distant highway or forgotten rural road. It was practically around the corner from where we lived back then. I'd walked past it hundreds of times on my morning runs. Jonah drove through it on his way to work. Kids rode their bikes there in the summer. How could something so horrific be so close? Nate watched me take it in. I didn't understand it at first, he said. The memory came blurry, like headlights, a stop sign, a turn. But this morning, it sharpened. I saw the sign clearly. Westminster Lane. I forced myself to breathe. Did they live there? The woman and the man? I think so, Nate said. Not at first. I remember waking up in different places early on. But the house I stayed in the longest, the one I keep dreaming about, That one had a narrow porch, old wooden posts, and a big cedar tree in the front yard. The kind that drops those long, soft cones. My stomach twisted. There were dozens of houses like that in our town. Yes, Nate said, but only one backed onto the old walking trail, the one you used to take Daniel on when he was little. My breath caught. I knew the house instantly. Pale yellow siding, a sagging mailbox. Always looked empty, but sometimes lights flickered inside late at night. That house, I whispered. Nate, that was 3 streets away from ours. He nodded. I remember hearing dogs bark at night. I remember hearing kids on bikes. I remember the smell of someone's barbecue drifting through the window in summer. All while I was searching the forests, the lakes, the edges of town. All while I stood on street corners handing out flyers with his picture. All while Jonah and I walked miles each evening, calling his name until our voices broke. All while he was alive, just blocks away. Nate's voice pulled me back. I don't think she kept me there at first, but later, yes, that house stayed in my mind. The cedar tree, the porch steps with peeling white paint, the sound of trains in the distance. That's near the old rail line, I murmured. We used to hear the trains every night from our place. Nate nodded. I remember lying awake listening to them, trying to figure out which direction they were going. Wondering if you could hear them too. My throat tightened painfully. We did. Every night. He swallowed hard. I wasn't allowed to go outside alone. She said I wouldn't understand. She said I'd get confused. And when I cried or asked questions, the man would take me out to the shed and talk to me in a quiet voice. Too quiet. I remember being terrified of that softness. A shiver ran down my back. Nate, why didn't anyone see you? Why didn't anyone report a child in that house? He shook his head slowly. Because most of the time, I wasn't allowed near windows. And when people came by, they put me somewhere else. His gaze darkened. And today, he said, voice trembling, another memory came back. I leaned forward. What memory? He took a breath. I remember hearing someone outside the house, someone calling my name. My heart stopped. Mom, he whispered, I think you were right outside the place they kept me. And you never knew. The words hit me so hard I had to grip the arm of the chair to stay steady. You heard me? I whispered. Are you sure? Nate closed his eyes like he was bracing himself against the memory. It didn't come back all at once. It came in flashes. Your voice was faint, like it was coming through water. But I remember it now. I remember you calling my name. Not yelling, just calling. Worried, hopeful. I felt something inside me crack. Where was I? Do you know? He nodded slowly. Right outside the fence, the one behind the house. I was in a back room on the 2nd floor. They had covered the windows with heavy curtains. But that day, one curtain wasn't closed all the way. I saw shadows. I heard footsteps. His voice trembled. And then I heard you. Tears blurred my vision. I had walked behind that very house dozens of times, flyers in hand, Jonah beside me, Daniel trailing behind, never knowing my missing child was watching from behind a curtain. I remember reaching for the window, Nate said, thinking if I made a sound, you'd find me. I even pressed my fingers against the glass. A knot tightened in my chest. Why didn't you call out? He opened his eyes. The guilt there was almost unbearable. Because she came into the room, he said. Mariel, she grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised. She told me if I made a sound, she'd tell you I was gone forever, that you had already stopped looking. My jaw clenched. That was a lie. I know that now, Nate whispered. But I was 13, confused, scared. I didn't understand why I was there, or why she acted like she owned every breath I took. His eyes drifted toward the wall, as if seeing the memory unfold. I remember thinking you sounded tired, like you'd been crying. I remember wanting to run to you so badly that my chest hurt. He swallowed hard. But I didn't move. I just stood there with my hand on the glass while she held my arm. I felt a wave of grief so sharp it almost doubled me over. I would have broken down that door, I said. I would have torn that house apart. His gaze softened. I know, but you didn't know I was there. They made sure you couldn't know. A silence settled over us, heavy and thick. Finally, Nate spoke again. There's something else, I realized. I forced myself to breathe. What is it? When I heard your voice that day, he said, Mariel wasn't the only one in the room. The man was there too. And he said something I didn't understand then. My pulse quickened. What did he say? Nate's jaw tightened. He said, we can't stay here anymore. She's too close. The air left my lungs. They moved because of me? Yes. His voice grew colder, clearer. But that's not the part that scares me. I looked at him, dread threading through me. Then what is? Nate leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. They didn't just move because you were close. They moved because someone warned them. Mom, he said, eyes darkening. Someone in our town helped them hide me. The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had leaned in. I stared at him, trying to make sense of the impossible. Someone helped them? I whispered. From our town? Nate nodded, his fingers twisting together. I didn't understand it at first, but when the memory came back this morning, it was clearer than the others. Someone knocked on the back door that night, the night you walked past the fence. My pulse thudded painfully. Who? I couldn't see his face, Nate said, but I remember his voice, low, tense, like he didn't want to be heard. He paused. He told them you were still searching, that you were getting too close. A cold shiver crept through me. A man? Yes. Nate rubbed his arms as if fighting off a chill. I think he was nervous. He kept saying, she's not letting this go. And the woman, Nariel, kept pacing, tapping that damn bracelet on the table. It was like a nightmare folding its shelf open. Do you remember anything else about him? I asked. Anything distinct? Nate frowned, thinking hard. He wore work boots, heavy ones, the kind that make that thick, thudding sound on old floors. His expression darkened, and he smelled like machine oil. Machine oil. My mind flicked through faces, names, the people who lived on those streets back then. Men who worked at the mill, mechanics, the local repair shops. A terrible thought crawled into my mind. Nate, I said slowly, did he ever say your name? Or mine? Nate hesitated. He said yours. I felt the blood drain from my face. He said my name? Yes. Nate's voice was steady now. He said Amelia isn't stopping. She talks to everyone. She's going to figure this out. A hollow ache tightened in my chest. I remembered that part of my life far too well. Those endless weeks of knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, begging for information. The whispers, the sympathy, the pity, the lies. Do you remember what Mariel said back? I asked. He nodded. She said, then we need to leave before she puts it together. My breath caught. Put what together? He shook his head slowly. I don't know. But I think it was more than just where they were keeping me. I think she was afraid you'd figure out who helped them. I swallowed hard, my mind racing through the possibilities. People who seemed too interested in the case. People who avoided eye contact. People who gave awkward excuses about where they'd been when Nate disappeared. People we trusted. Nate shifted in his chair. There's something else I remember. Something I didn't tell the doctor. My heart clenched. What? He looked up, eyes clouded with something grim and certain. The man who warned them. He called Mariel by another name. A nickname. A nickname? I repeated. Yes. Nate leaned forward, lowering his voice so no one outside the door could hear. He called her Mary. My breath stilled. There had only been one person in town everyone called Mary, and she was someone I once considered a friend. I felt the air leave my lungs. A friend? That word had barely formed before memories rushed back. Mariel Sutton. I had trusted her once, invited her into our home, helped with neighborhood events. smiled at her at every parent meeting. Never once did I suspect she could be capable of this. Nate watched me carefully. I didn't understand it at first. I thought she was just the woman who took me. But this morning, the memory is sharper. She knew you. I sank back in the chair, gripping the armrests. We trusted her. My voice cracked. We invited her into our lives. And she took advantage of it, Nate said. His eyes were fierce now, holding the storm of memory he'd carried alone for decades. She knew about you, about your routines, about your searching. She used it against me. The thought of her smiling in our living room while plotting this made bile rise in my throat. I remember, Nate continued, her and the man arguing after the call came. He warned her, Amelia is too determined. She will find out. And she said, she'll never know everything. My stomach twisted. Never know everything. But the truth was beginning to come back, piece by piece. I forced myself to ask, though the words were a whisper. Do you remember his face? Nate shook his head. Only partially. Eyes sharp, heavy brow, strong jaw. I remember the smell, machine oil and wet leather. He was always around the garage, always quiet, always watching. I pressed my hands together, trying to hold my thoughts still. A garage. That would be near the edge of town, on the road that leads to the old mill. He nodded. Yes, that's where they kept me for months after they moved me from Westminster Lane. That's where I started to believe Nathaniel didn't exist, that Rowan Beck was the only me. I felt my heart tighten, imagining my son in some dimly lit garage, living as someone else while the world believed he was gone forever. And yet, Nate whispered, I remember something else. Something that's been buried under fear and survival for decades. I leaned forward instinctively. What is it? He swallowed hard. I remember seeing someone from our town once. Not Mariel, someone else. They left food, supplies. Told Mariel the boy wasn't to be harmed. That they'd check in. My stomach dropped. A secret ally? Or someone complicit? How could anyone in our town be part of this nightmare and not have known? Nate's eyes locked on mine. Mom, this wasn't random. This wasn't just a kid disappearing. They planned it. They knew people would look. And someone helped them hide me. Someone I think you know. I shook slightly, trying to process the weight of his words. Betrayal, fear, guilt, all tangled together. And the scariest part? Nate said, voice barely audible. I don't know if they're still out there, watching. Mom, he said, voice trembling. I think the nightmare isn't over. The air in the room felt heavier, like something unseen had settled over us. I forced myself to breathe slowly, the way I used to when panic threatened to take control during those endless search days. But the panic now felt different. It was older, sharper, filled with the weight of everything Nate had survived. What do you mean the nightmare isn't over? I asked quietly. Nate rubbed his palms on his knees, a habit he had as a child when he was nervous. Because the last thing I remember from that house, the garage she moved me to, was someone coming to the door late at night. Someone Mariel clearly respected. Someone who wasn't afraid to tell her what to do. My pulse quickened. A third person? Yes, he nodded slowly. But I never saw them. I only heard the voice. I braced myself. Male or female? Female, Nate said. Older, calm, not angry, not panicked, just in control. She talked to Mariel like a supervisor, like she was the one running everything. My mind spun. Did she say a name? He closed his eyes as if listening again. She called Mariel Sutton. Not Mary, not Mariel, just Sutton, cold, formal. She didn't use her first name at all. A chill slid down my spine. What did she say? That they were relocating me. That the town was becoming too alert. And Mariel argued. She was frustrated, scared even. She said they could keep me hidden, but the older woman insisted. Nate looked up, his voice suddenly fragile. I think that's when they moved me for the final time. After that, everything gets foggy. New places, new rules, new names. I swallowed hard. Do you remember anything about the older woman? Anything at all? He hesitated. Not her face, not her clothes, but her shoes. Her shoes? Yes. His brow furrowed. They made a distinct sound on the concrete floor. A sharp click, like heels. Not casual shoes, not sneakers. More formal, like she dressed up for something. There were very few women in our small town back then who wore heels regularly. I felt the list forming in my mind. Teachers, administrators, a few business owners, church staff. Women whose names I knew well. Women I had trusted. Nate watched me quietly. He knew I was putting pieces together even before I admitted it. I can't believe this, I whispered. All these years, and someone right under our noses was part of it. That's why I said the nightmare might not be over. He leaned forward. Because if she ran things, if she was the one making decisions, she didn't just vanish. She didn't just stop existing when they moved me. My heart pounded. Do you think she's still alive? Nate nodded slowly, certainty tightening his jaw. Yes, and I think she's the reason no one ever found me. Not the police, not the volunteers, not you. A cold dread settled in my bones. And there's something else, he said. Something I've been afraid to tell you. I met his eyes. What is it? He took a long breath. Mom, I think she knew our family long before I disappeared, and I think she had a reason for choosing me. My pulse thudded in my ears. A reason for choosing you? I repeated. Nate, what do you mean by that? He looked down at his hands, flexing them slowly, like he was trying to anchor himself in the present. This part is messy, he said. It comes in bits. Not memories exactly. More like impressions, feelings that don't fit anywhere else. I leaned closer. Start with whatever you do remember. He took a shaky breath. The older woman, the one Mariel answered to. She wasn't reacting to me like I was some random kid. She spoke about me like she'd seen me before. Or expected me. A chill rolled through me. Expected you how? She said something like, this is the one we talked about. The timing lined up. Nate's voice tightened. I didn't understand it then. I barely understand it now. My fingers curled around the armrest. The one they talked about? Yes. He nodded slowly. Which means they didn't take me because I was alone or vulnerable. They didn't pick me at random. The words landed like stones in my chest. They targeted you, I whispered. Yes, he said softly. And I think it had something to do with you. With our family. Maybe something you didn't know was happening. I tried to breathe evenly, but my lungs felt tight. Faces from my past drifted through my mind. Teachers, neighbors, co-workers. Volunteers from the community center. The people who helped with the early searches. Any of them could have been close enough to know us. Too close. Nate continued. Mariel never mentioned them by name, but I remember her saying one sentence that doesn't make sense unless this woman knew you. What sentence? He looked me straight in the eyes. She said, Amelia won't interfere this time. The air froze around me. This time? I echoed. What does that mean? I don't know, Nate said quickly, but Mariel said it with resentment, like she hated you, like she thought you'd ruined something before. His hands twitched, and the older woman told her to forget the past, that history couldn't repeat itself. My throat tightened. History? What history could they possibly be talking about? I don't know, he said again. But the way they talked, it was like your name meant something to them. Like they had been watching us for a long time, before I vanished. I shook my head slowly. I would have noticed. I would have seen something. Not if they were careful, Nate said gently. Not if they were people you trusted. People who smiled at you. People who pretended to care. The realization seeped into my bones, heavy as lead. Someone had been close, too close, and they had used that closeness to steal my son. Nate exhaled shakily. And there's something more, something I didn't want to say until I was sure. My heart stuttered. Tell me. He lifted his eyes, filled with dread and certainty. Mom, I think they were watching us long before I disappeared. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. How long? I whispered. Nate swallowed. Years. And I think they weren't just watching me. They were watching Daniel, too. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with an icy fist. They were watching Daniel? I whispered. Why? Nate shook his head slowly. I don't know if they planned anything. I just know I wasn't the only one they paid attention to. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of my chair. Nate, you need to tell me everything, even if it feels small. He took a moment to steady himself. I remember Mariel talking once, quiet, like she didn't want the man to hear. She said something like, the younger one is too attached, too visible, not him. And the man said, we only need one. My stomach turned. One? Yes. Nate's voice cracked. I think they were choosing, and I think they decided on me. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. The idea that Daniel, my youngest, had ever been discussed by these people made something primal rise in me. A fury so old and so deep it felt like it had been waiting for years. Why you? I asked. Did they ever say why? Not directly, Nate replied. But I remember the older woman, Sutton's supervisor, saying something about temperament, about me being more malleable. And she said Daniel was too connected, too social, too noticed. Taking him would have created more questions. A bitter, painful understanding settled over me. Nate, you were quieter, always reading, always daydreaming. Daniel was the talkative one, the one everyone at school knew. Nate nodded. I think that's why they picked me. I think they thought I'd disappear more cleanly. I pressed a hand to my mouth, letting the realization sink in. My son wasn't taken because of chance. He wasn't taken because he wandered at the wrong time. He was chosen. After a long pause, Nate said softly, Mom, there's something else I remember about the older woman. I opened my eyes. What? He hesitated, searching for the right words. She spoke to Mariel like she'd known our town for years. She mentioned the annual festival. She talked about the school board once. She said something about how people gossip too much in small places. My blood ran cold. Only someone deeply familiar with our community would say something like that. Someone who lived among us. Someone who blended in without effort. Do you think she was from our town? I asked. I think she was connected to it, Nate said. Deeply. Maybe not living there full time, but she knew it well enough to move around unnoticed. I tried to picture the women from back then. Teachers, counselors, committee members. Any one of them could have been involved. Someone I had smiled at in grocery aisles. Someone who'd asked how the search was going. Someone who pretended to care. This woman, I said quietly. What else do you remember about her? Nate's expression shifted. Fear, but also certainty. The last conversation I heard, Mariel asked her, what if the mother starts recognizing things? And the older woman said, he looked at me, voice barely above a whisper. She won't. She never saw me then. She won't see me now. A cold shudder ripped through me. Then, I repeated, when was then? He swallowed hard. Mom. Whatever they did, whatever plan they had, it started long before I disappeared. And I think you may have crossed paths with this woman years before she ever took me. Her words echoed in my head. She never saw me then. She won't see me now. I tried to steady my breathing, but it felt like the walls were closing in. Nate, I said quietly. If I crossed paths with her, why don't I remember? Nate shook his head with a troubled expression. Because she blended in. She wasn't the kind of person who drew attention. She was the type people trusted without thinking. The type who worked behind the scenes. Committees, events, organizations that needed volunteers who didn't ask questions. A slow, dawning dread crept through me. The kind of woman who could walk into a room and be invisible and indispensable at the same time. Someone who worked with parents and children. Someone who knew families, ours included. I swallowed hard. Do you remember anything else at all? Anything that could help identify her? He hesitated. Not a face, not a clear voice, but I do remember one thing. He looked up, and his eyes were filled with a certainty that chilled me. She wore a pendant, a long silver one. It had a shape I didn't recognize as a kid, but now, he paused. Now I think it was a crest or a logo, something official. A crest? I repeated. Like a school? A program? A company? That's what I'm trying to figure out, he said. I've been trying to match it to memories, but every time I get close, my head feels like it's going to split, like something inside me doesn't want me to remember. I reached across the small space between us and took his hand. You don't have to force it today. We'll take it one step at a time. He nodded, but I saw the tension still running through him. There's more, he said quietly. When I was moved the final time, the older woman told Mariel, this one is important. If anything goes wrong, it will fall on you. And Mariel said, it won't. I felt my chest constrict. Important? I echoed. Why would you be important to them? Nate shook his head. I don't know. But I think they had a purpose for me, a role, something they wanted to shape me into. I felt a surge of anger, sharp and bright. You weren't theirs to shape. No, he said, eyes softening. I wasn't, and I think that's why they kept moving me, why they kept hiding me, because they weren't done with whatever plan they had. A terrible thought formed in the back of my mind. What if the disappearance wasn't meant to be permanent? I whispered. What if they planned to bring you back someday? Nate exhaled shakily. Maybe they did, but something changed. Maybe someone got scared. Maybe someone died. Maybe the group fell apart. I felt my pulse quicken. Do you think any of them are still alive? He didn't hesitate. Yes. The word hung heavy between us. And I think the older woman, the one who oversaw everything, she's still out there. And if she ever finds out, I remember her. He squeezed my hand, his voice barely audible. Mom, she won't let it go. A long silence settled over the room. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, but not really. And she knows your name. But what neither of us knew yet, what we were about to discover, was that the woman who took him had never truly left our lives at all.